Welcome, everybody. We're really happy to have everybody here for Atlantika Collective. It's nice to have something different for this week, for sure. I think we've had one or two collectives speak in the distant past. And just a couple quick announcements before we get to our student person who will introduce the group. Next Monday for seniors, it's a really busy day, but we're having a required mandatory meeting in the Lazarus Auditorium at 9:30 in the morning. So all core groups, GFA painting, drawing, should attend that. This is about the overview for Art Walk senior show. So you don't want to miss that presentation. And then at 12 o'clock is another lecture here. So it's a busy week. And then at 5 o'clock, we've planned an opening for the show that's over in Lazarus. So we sent out a PDF, a flyer announcement, so you could send that to your friends. We're particularly interested if you have any friends in the first or second year, especially first year students, who we'd love to have them come over to the Lazarus Center, see the studios, see the show, maybe pick one of our majors as a major next year. So if you have any friends, younger friends, freshmen or sophomore, please invite them over to that show or send out the flyer yourself. And then the last thing is, as per usual, at 5 o'clock, we will have an informal Q&A over in the Lazarus Center in the studios nearest the kitchen, second floor lounge. So, and you get to meet two of our collective will be over there having questions and conversation. With that, it's our tradition that we always invite a senior whose work may seem relative to the speaker of the day. We always invite a speaker to have the honor of introducing the group. And I'd like to say that whoever these seniors are, they are asked to write their own introduction. We don't write them for them. And so it's a really nice honor. So with that, I'm going to ask our senior to come up and do the introduction.
Hello, I'm Miley. I'm a senior painting major, and today I have the great opportunity to introduce the Atlantika Collective. The Atlantika Collective is a group of international artists, writers, curators, educators, and thinkers. The group promotes idea sharing, connections, and collaboration in an open circle model to strengthen support for the arts and society. Despite their diverse backgrounds, Atlantika members collectively create and exhibit art that addresses various social concerns, with a significant focus on the climate crisis. Several of the Atlantika Collective's climate crisis projects have been presented and featured in numerous college exhibits and galleries. Notable among these are Approaching Event Horizons projects on climate change at George Mason University's Mason exhibitions, Prescient Surfaces at the Rocky Mountain College of Montana's Reinecard Morrison Gallery, and the Watershed Project at St. Mary's College of Maryland's Boyden Gallery. The Atlantika Collective's projects serve as a testament to the interconnectedness between our humanity and the environment, seeking to ignite contemplation and awareness. The artists use various mediums, including painting, sculpture, photography, and multimedia installation, to articulate the urgency of these environmental issues. By bringing to light a range of issues such as contaminated waters, drastic changes in temperature, wildfires, erosion, deforestation, and pollution, the collective's work can resonate with a wide audience. The current Climate for Change exhibition at Bunting's Pinkard Gallery not only raises awareness of these consequences, but also urges immediate action for a more sustainable future. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing more about the collective's work and a brief anatomy of an art collective. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the artist, curator, and graphic designer of Climate for Change, Gabriela Bolasova, Todd R. Forsgren, Billy Freeble, Mark Isaac, Katie Kehoe, Yam Chu, Sue Werbican, Maria Sinez, and Megan Irwin.
Mark and Gabriella?
I assume we can begin?
Yes, please.
Good evening from Prague, Czech Republic, everyone. Thank you so much for the kind and very thoughtful introduction. My name is Gabriela Bolishova, and I'm here with my husband and artistic collaborator, Mark Isaac. And it's our honor and great pleasure to, at least virtually, return to our alma mater, MICA, for this talk and for Climate for Change Atlantika Collective's current exhibition. And if we can move to the next slide, please. And before each one of us has an opportunity to speak, please allow Mark and I to briefly introduce the collective, even though it already received such a nice introduction. Atlantika is now, and it wasn't always the case, truly an international collective of, as it was said, artists, writers, educators, and curators. Next slide, please. The original group came together around mutual interests with heavy focus on photography. It started in 2016, as you can see, in the mid-Atlantic region, hence the name. However, it has grown since in terms of membership, geography, and the diversity of its members and their practices. Next, please. On this next map, you can see that we cover different parts of the United States and also heart of Europe, Czech Republic, where Mark and I currently live. And today we're really excited because the collective is active and is highly committed and productive, and we work together exceptionally well.
Next slide, please. The reason that we work together so well has to do with both shared commitments and shared interests. And we, as was said by Miley, we are focused on collaboration, and we have an open circle model. Particularly at the time of the pandemic, we were busy critiquing each other's work very regularly and also inviting other artists to present. We are committed also to transparency about our work. We are fully in support of social responsibility. And I think given the number of different crises that are happening throughout the world right now, which some refer to as polycrisis, we believe it's important to now move beyond the idea of simply raising awareness as artists and trying to mobilize people into action. Next slide, please. We found out soon after we gathered, actually, that we had a lot of the same interests. And it turns out that everyone in Atlantica is working in some way on the climate crisis and the other environmental threats that we face around the world. There are also many of our members that have a connection to the post-communist and socialist world or have done projects there. And in particular, also recently, at the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we were very active around that subject. Next slide, please. During this post-pandemic period, as Miley referred to, and she stole our thunder a little bit here, but we've really been focused on exhibitions, and particularly on the climate issue. And so the most recent exhibitions, there's really been a series of 4. They've been evolving for each location. They change. And we began in Montana, as was said. We then had 2 at George Mason University, one at their Arlington campus and one in Fairfax. And now we're particularly pleased to be in Baltimore because really almost every Atlantica member actually has a strong connection to MICA. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Gabriela, for that introduction. And thank you, everyone at MICA, for helping us bring this exhibition to life. And thank you, Howie, for opening this space for us today. I am Maria Saenz, curator of Climate for Change and member of Atlantika Collective since 2022. I am originally from Colombia and have been curating in the US for the past 6 years. And currently I'm based in Connecticut. As Mark said, Climate for Change is part of a series of exhibitions that we've organized around the environmental crisis. And today, after my intervention, each artist will present their own work in the show. And at the end, we're also going to have Megan Irving, an amazing graphic designer and MICA alumnus, who joined us in this adventure designing all the graphic content for the exhibition. Next slide, please. So Climate for Change illustrates the current environmental emergency and complex symptoms of climate change. As ecological planetary crisis unfolds, the works in this exhibition advocates for immediate action. They act as beacons that bring light to the possibilities of transforming our relationship with the natural world. Next slide. The 7 artists in this exhibition bring together works that address concerns about environmental degradation, plastic pollution, polluted and contaminated waters, intense variations in temperature, erosion, increasing deforestation, and forest fires. Next, please. Balancing fear with hope, the artists take us beyond the step of awareness towards action that has the potential to result in meaningful transitions to end a vicious cycle that threatens to spiral out of control. Next, please. Some of the works are site-specific or focus on local issues that affect the area where the exhibition takes place, and others address issues in the global scale of the climate crisis. Next, please. Curating the exhibition becomes a collective effort in highlighting all the works and making them dialogue with each other. Next. I have a background in architecture and embracing the challenge of remotely curating this exhibition. I read and understood the space through floor plans and photographs. And this process led me to group the works in relation to different themes, such as water, forests, and unsustainable development. Next slide. And so with this, we will hear now from the artist, and we begin with the theme of water.
Hi, everyone. My name is Billy Freeble. Thanks for coming out. I was in the MFAS low residency summer program for MFA, and I'm currently teaching at Loyola up the street, associate professor of visual art. And I've been focusing on the Anacostia River, which is down close to Washington, D.C. for about the past 3 or 4 years. It was once dubbed the Forgotten River for its heavy levels of toxins and pollution. It was very neglected, although recently it's been coming around as there have been a lot of efforts to clean it up. So as I was, I ended up visiting this river quite a bit. You can go ahead and advance. And just like a few months ago, I was walking along and I saw that somebody had thrown a printer into the river. And I found that pretty disturbing. And so I've been using a lot of waterproof cameras to capture what goes on beneath the surface of these rivers. And you'll see there's this whole kind of ecosystem that ends up happening around the printer. So I don't know if you're able to see, but coming up right here, there's a little, it might be hard to see, but there's there it is. There's like kind of a fish just hanging out underneath the printer. And there's a school of fish that's circling it. You see the algae growing on it. As you go out of the water, there's vines that are wrapping around it. So it's kind of being reclaimed by the river. But it also makes me think a lot about, a lot of my thinking here is that, this technology that we use comes from beneath the surface of the earth, right? We take it out by violent means. And when we're done with it, we throw it back into the earth, right? And so it goes back beneath the surface. And so kind of exploring beneath the depths was my interest there. You can go ahead and advance. And so in this exploring this relationship between humans, technology, and the river, I fed 50 still images from that video to an AI because I was interested in like, well, what are those fish perceiving of this technology, right? I can never know that, but AI is another sort of non-human element that I can collaborate with. And so the center images you see here were generated by the AI from that video. And what I really enjoyed in these images are just how surprising and distorted they are, but also how like the circuit board patterns start to overlay on the trees and tree patterns kind of overlay back onto the circuit board. So the aspect that's around that is me recreating the image of the AI using natural materials that I gather from the river. You can go ahead and advance. And so it's paint combined with algae and soil and water. This is the circuit board that was in the river, and you can see there's lots of soil caked on it. And I just found this really interesting, almost as a landscape, a found object it's in between states of being, technology and nature, somewhere right in between. And then here's another AI piece. Similar but different in the way that it interprets it. Feels kind of like a landscape painting in some sense. And then there's one more here that's kind of an experiment. This is another circuit board that was pulled off the printer with an AI print next to it, and kind of just playing around with form and using the natural materials underneath. So kind of as a warning that, pollution in these rivers is a really dangerous thing. Dumping is a real problem. And as we try to clean them up, there's all these PCBs that are extremely, extremely toxic to humans as we try to clean up these rivers. So there's this intertwined relationship between technology and the rivers. Finally, AI, when you train those AIs, they consume massive amounts of water to cool down their supercomputers. So water and technology and AI are very closely tied together. So thank you very much.
To continue with the theme of water, in 2018 and 2019, under the auspices of the Fulbright program, Mark and I spent 10 months in Southeast Siberia at Lake Baikal, where we worked on a multimedia project about the lake's ecological problems, including rapid climate change and growing levels of pollution. Next slide, please. And perhaps not everybody knows where Lake Baikal is located, so this map will give you a sense where it is. And we will now show you just a few photographs from a much larger project. Some of them are included in the exhibition. And Yanshu, yes, if you can keep advancing as we talk. Thank you. So Lake Baikal, simply put, is the most important lake in the world. It's the oldest lake, the deepest. It's over a mile deep. It's the most biologically diverse and most voluminous lake. It contains 1/5 of all the world's fresh water. In other words, if you put water from all the Great Lakes into Lake Baikal, there would still be room left, if you can imagine that. So currently, due to overconsumption and climate change, over 2 billion people globally do not have access to fresh and safe drinking water. But instead of protecting the sacred lake, as the local indigenous population calls it, instead of protecting the world's freshwater reservoir, things are headed in the wrong direction. And Mark will talk about that a little.
So I just wanted to mention the title of the project, The Second Fire. It's an allusion to the origin myth of the indigenous Buryat people. And according to that myth, there was an enormous earthquake, fire came out of the ground, and people cried, "By Gal," which in the Buryat language means fire stop. And the fire stopped and water filled in the crevice. So, so that was the first fire, but now we have the second fire, the fire of climate change. And unfortunately, the entire Baikal region is warming at more than twice the pace of most of the rest of the world, and this is affecting the entire ecosystem. At the same time, there are terrible problems with pollution and lack of wastewater treatment, the expanded tourism, and this is affecting the shallow areas and making them very, very polluted. But the worst thing of all right now is that the Russian government is using the excuse of Western sanctions to eliminate environmental safeguards. That means that the lake's future is really in doubt, and we could lose that 1/5 of the world's water supply. So this is really, really a tragedy in the making. And I just want to mention that our full project is a lot wider than this photograph selection. It includes several 3-channel videos. It includes music created from scientific data about climate change and original essays as well. And basically, our hope in this work is with all the problems facing the world, including the war that's going on in Russia and Ukraine, we won't forget about this precious resource, and that we'll all do our part to find a way to save Lake Baikal. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Todd Forsgren. I was at MICA teaching for MICA Photo from 2011 to 2017 off and on. And I know at least one of my former colleagues from MICA Photo is there in the audience. I'm calling in from Montana to talk about one chapter of a 5-chapter project called Full Fathom 5 that's about ecological fish issues facing the ocean. Because what does one do when they move to Montana but start working on a project about the oceans? So the chapter I'm going to talk to you guys most about today is what's in the exhibition. It's called XX Colonies. And if you'll go to the next slide here. Here is one of the images from that series. This is coral that I photographed in the Smithsonian collection in Washington, D.C., in the Natural History Museum there. You can see this particular piece of coral in the upper left corner was collected on the Albatross's expedition from 1885 to 1886 with that beautiful calligraphy. But then over the course of the following 150 years, a lot of different scientists have touched this piece of coral and changed how we understand that. Each of these little dots is an individual coral polyp. They're living as a colony. If you go to the next slide. So XX Colonies, the name of the chapter, has a couple of different meanings. The coral is a colonial species, but coral are also from colonial areas, largely areas that have been largely affected by European imperialism and colonialism and are being extremely affected by climate change, despite their value to fisheries and the oceans. And then the U.S. exploring expedition is actually the founding expedition of the Smithsonian from 1838 to 1842, right when photography was discovered. It was this flexing of U.S. colonial as well as scientific ambition. If you go to the next slide. So here we have another coral species, super diverse species. This is their skeleton. This is, they're ripped out of the oceans. So that XX is also sort of the double death of coral, once from them these physical objects being ripped out of the oceans for scientific purposes, and also from ocean acidification and temperature change that is causing coral bleaching and coral death. If you go to the next slide. Here we have a really large species of coral. So this is just 2 coral polyps that are all of these are printed sort of life size in the exhibition at, and so you'll see the incredible diversity of different coral species that we're understanding more and more as we use different molecular tools, and we understand not just the dead ones, but also living coral. If you go to the next slide. Here's the collection. So only about 1% of what you see in any museum is probably actually on display. Thousands, almost a million different invertebrates. I got to look at ones that were taken from the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, or taken out of Bikini Atoll just before it was bombed. If you go to the next slide. No, this one was the first of this species that was described by science. That's why it's got that little dot on it. It's called a holotype. Next one, please. And Anna Atkins's work from right around the same time of the XX expedition of algae is a reason that these are types. Also, that's why these are species that's why I print them as cyanotypes. And now briefly, I'll just let you guys see visually some of the other chapters. So if you can just kind of go through the next, Yamchu. ARMS, autonomous reef monitoring structures used to monitor coral and other reef health. Next slide. Or the one project I actually get wet during, which is photographing plastic bags in this sort of pictorial way with these strange different designs on them. Next slide. Seafood and the aestheticization of seafood. Next slide. And here is water surfaces, be it oil on water, bioluminescent water, or algal blooms photographed with color infrared film. Thank you guys for your time.
Next slide. I'm grateful to MICA to be here, so thank you for this opportunity. I completed my MFA at the Mount Royal School of Art in 2011, and I'm currently an assistant professor teaching sculpture and expanded media at Florida State University. Next slide. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I work primarily in socially engaged performance and site-specific installation. I create survival architecture, objects, and wearables that I use as props in my performances and elements in my site-specific installations. My objective is to engage the public to reflect on specific sites in relation to climate change and extreme weather events. Next slide, please. This is a series of 5 portable wildfire shelters I created during a residency at the Santa Fe Art Institute in May. These measure approximately 7 feet by 20 inches by 36 inches. Next slide, please. And my objective was to create work that was relevant to the region. And so when I researched, I learned that a year earlier, New Mexico had experienced the largest wildfire in the recorded history. And it was just east of Santa Fe. Next slide, please. And so I created these series of wildfire shelters, and I came across this map it's the footprint for the wildfires, basically. It's the Calf Canyon and Hermit's Peak fire that merged to burn over 40,000 acres east of Santa Fe. And I would use that as a map, and I would drive in and out of dirt roads looking for suitable places to install. Next slide, please. And so I carried out a series of site-specific installations, documenting with digital photography, arranging the wildfire shelters in different configurations. Next slide, please. And you'll see with each of these images, I also include the coordinates, the GPS coordinates. So conceivably, anyone can return to these locations and visit the sites that had been impacted by this fire where I installed this body of work. Next slide, please. And I created the shelters so that they have the appearance of offering protection from flame, heat, and smoke exposure. They're not functional. They're sculptural objects. I call them survival architecture. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Mark and I are also sharing some images from a project called A Tree for the Forest, which examines the role of trees in climate crisis. And we focus on 2 related topics: forest fires and the discovery that trees communicate underground. Next slide, please. In the response to extremely hot weather and drought, many parts of the world, as Katie mentioned, are experiencing the worst wildfires in their history. Next slide. And around the world, the fire season is longer, more land is burned, and fires are more destructive than before. And of course, each one of these events releases more carbon dioxide, only worsening climate change. Next slide. So to call attention to this crisis, I developed an entire roll of medium format film as a continuous landscape that is impacted by forest fire. Next slide. But because these scrolls are so long and big, it's very difficult to show them in this format. So I'm including some details so you get a little better sense maybe of what they look like up close. And next slide. Many of these images were actually captured at the scenes of wildfires in Cyprus and in Czech Republic. And after I capture the images, then I selectively burn the negatives to further emphasize the impact and the damage of fires on trees. And next slide. Then I scan the negatives and I print these large-scale panoramas that confront us and demand our attention and hopefully, even more importantly, demand our action.
And next slide, please. And my related work is focusing on a more positive aspect of the climate crisis, and that's the discovery that trees are busy communicating underground. I think most of us have heard now that trees are sending alarms to each other, they're sharing nutrients, and that mother trees are supporting younger trees in their vicinity. Next slide, please. These discoveries can help improve the health of our forests, and that in turn will help us remove carbon from the atmosphere and alleviate the climate crisis. Next slide, please. So responding to this, I'm making these panoramic photographs of the tree canopy while walking underneath. To me, they're strongly suggesting the manner in which trees are communicating. They vibrate with energy. They suggest that the trees are singing or dancing. Next slide, please. But I think at the same time, the very exuberant nature of the images is also tempered by the fact that they're stark black and white silhouettes, which also hints at the threats that have been talked about to trees and also links directly back to Gabriella's work. So next slide, please. We didn't have space in the Pinkard Gallery to show these enormous scrolls. So instead, for this exhibition, we're showing some details. And we enjoy the details very much also. The next 4 images are in the show, and Yamchu, you can just move through them, one by one. I should say in this case also that our full project is larger again. It includes video and original music. And we wanted to say a word about the title of the project because it emphasizes the fact that we all have the ability to fight climate change. And in fact, like we can stand tall like a mother tree, perhaps, connected to those around us, providing support for a healthy planet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for coming. It's great to see everybody here, and it's truly an honor to be at MICA giving a talk with my colleagues. I am going to have Yamchu put up the first slide in my little presentation here. And while you look at that, I'm going to read my thoughts about my work. Okay, like where did it go? Sorry. There we go. So this is my studio in DC. And then when I'm done reading my statement, Yamchu is going to just briefly click through each slide after that. Great. So I see my work in the exhibition representing my frustrations concerning packaging and the inability to truly recycle it. Most of the world's plastic cannot be recycled. The oil industry created that myth to quell criticism about this unfriendly to the earth process. Around 2019, I started saving plastic and cardboard in my studio from shipments of consumer goods, using the gathered mounds of it to create maquettes and backgrounds to form otherworldly seascapes. In creating the sculptural forms, I envisioned them as surreal futures for objects that once had meaning, drifting away in unpredictable, mysterious currents. In regard to one of the images you'll see in the exhibition called Before the Ghost, it was inspired by Lars von Trier's Melancholia, a film that had an indelible effect on me, planting the idea that if Earth vanished, all life and its histories would also vanish. While some of the works are abstract, others are more recognizable, such as the parade-like works from the Ship Split and the works from All Hands to the Crude Gathering series, which conjure up scraps independently reforming themselves into their own regatta or a parade of ships with nowhere to go. So I'll let it go at that for now, and Yamchu will now present each image for 5 seconds. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yam Chu Oh. I'm a MICA alum. I'm an international admissions counselor at the MICA office in the main building. And I'm also a faculty member at the School of Visual Arts in New York. I joined Atlantika Collective around 2019, 2020 after moving from New York to Baltimore. I was looking for a community, having sort of left my grad school community in New York, and was very grateful to find Atlantika. And a collective, it's a way of working as an artist that I never thought I would be involved in. It's not easy because we are a voluntary group. We're in different locations and time zones across the world. But when it really works like with like-minded people, sincere and caring folks such as with Atlantika, it's actually immensely rewarding. So something to think about. I have two works in this exhibition. Next slide. The painting on the left called We'll Cross the Bridge When We Get There, and the sculpture in the middle called A Convenient Matter. Next slide. We'll Cross the Bridge When We Get There was inspired by the closing lines in the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken. Frost wrote, "Two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." At the center of the process-driven painting are issues of choice, decision, and action. These are not dissimilar to those in fighting climate change. Next slide, please. And a convenient matter is a response to the number of single-use plastic bottles I encountered during COVID-19 quarantine in Singapore, where I'm from. Globally, about 1 million plastic bottles are purchased every minute, and Americans send 38 billion water bottles to landfills yearly. That's about 1,500 every second. So the staggering challenge we are facing stems from this culture of convenience, hence the title of the piece. At the center of this 13-feet sculpture are inkjet prints of the common 5-gallon blue water container, which I photographed and printed on secondhand vellum. And here are a few shots of it glowing at night in my kitchen. Next slide. Next slide, please. Part of my process is allowing the printed vellum to curl and roll up as it dried, and then freezing their shapes with a single staple. The paper rolls took on various meanings as the piece came into being, including water, oceanic creatures, and rolled incense paper offered to the dead in the Taoist culture that I grew up in. Next slide. I'm also interested in packaging materials and their connotations of protection and containment. And in a convenient matter, I thought about the futility of protecting our water resources and oceanic wildlife through this porous and torn Christmas tree netting, which I collected. It's trying to hold everything up like a giant water drop or a teardrop, whatever you take it to be. Thank you. Megan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Irwin, and I'm an alum of MICA's graphic design MFA program from 2022. And I was fortunate to be connected with Atlantika through MICA and have spent the last couple of months meeting with the artists and learning about their work surrounding the climate crisis. Next slide, please. My role in this exhibition was to translate the curatorial narrative and represent this collective of artists in the design of the visual identity for the show. And the goal was to communicate a unified message, primarily through the language and the typography. So I explored themes of environmental degradation, depletion, erosion, and change over time. Next slide, please. So additionally, during the initial design iteration, I responded to how the collective work highlights our human connection to the natural world, along with our need to respond with urgency, hope, and action. Next slide. And in the end, the experimental typography erodes and dissolves while also responding and rebuilding. And this really felt connected to the work for me and the central message in the show, urging action amidst the crisis. And the title text actually shifts from the wall to the floor, and that was done in order to demonstrate the impact of this work beyond the gallery space, and to also draw viewers in to engage with the work. As a graphic designer, it is such a privilege to collaborate with all other artists in a creative process. And so I'm very thankful to be a small part of Atlantika's important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone today for joining us. And before we open the floor to questions, we would like to first encourage everyone to support other efforts that the local arts community is undertaking on environmental issues. We would also like to invite you to stay tuned to the programming associated with this exhibition. We are preparing a very interesting conversation with academics, local artists, and activists. And the date, we'll have a date very, very soon for you guys. And finally, just leave a last message. Climate for Change call for all of us to reimagine new horizons in search of a better ecological and sustainable future for the Earth. The works in this exhibition insist that now is a time for change, the time for all of us to take steps to form an equitable relationship with our natural surroundings. Thank you very much.
So I think we have a little bit of time. We'll be happy to take any questions that you might have for us. I think we also have our colleagues there who has a microphone if you would speak into that. Thank you.
Hi, for the fire shelters, are you at all interested in making them like an actual usable thing?
Well, that's a great question. When I started posting images on Instagram, people were like, well, you know, those are, yeah, they actually already exist. People who fight fires have wildfire shelters. The design is more minimal. They're like half cylinders, and it's meant to be used as a last resort. It's a 50-50% survival rate, and they're developed by NASA. So the material that's needed to make them functional, I don't have access to at this point. I do think that we are, I mean, the whole point of the project is to raise the question, are we getting to a point that it is actually becoming necessary that devices such as these are more readily available and we carry them with us from a day-to-day basis. So I think we might be getting to a point that it might need to be more readily, yeah. So I'd love that. We'll see what happens. Thank you.
Hi, a lot of your work I feel like does like bring awareness to this issue, but I'm wondering what actions are you guys taking to combat climate change?
Maybe I'll start by answering that question. I use my art practice as a platform for taking action as well. In the last 3 years, that's become something that's really important to me. I've facilitated various tree planting actions that are socially engaged activities that encourage people to reflect on the importance of trees and how they contribute to basically their sustainable infrastructure for our environments. And so I've carried out multiple tree planting that involve planting native trees in specific sites. And so far, I've done one in Nova Scotia, Canada, Fairfax, Virginia, and Tallahassee, Florida.
Yeah, that's a great question. Also, we're going to be bringing in Blue Water Baltimore, which is an organization that works to clean up the waterways here, and they do a lot of tree planting. So we hope to kind of have that be something that grows out of this exhibition, that we can sort of promote their volunteer opportunities. And for me, it's really, I mean, all of these topics are so big and weighty that I think it's really about coming down to the local level. I do a lot of stuff in like my local town that has a sustainability group, or like I'm doing a class this spring that's also collaborating with Blue Water Baltimore. It's an animation class, and we are going to be making short animations that basically help to teach the public about some of the things that are hard for them to explain, like these fat burgers that get stuck in, they're just like grease mountains that get stuck in the pipes and things like that. So we're looking forward to doing that.
Yes, that's a very good question. And I think a lot of institutions are now really trying to find some answers in terms of curriculum. I teach at George Mason. I'm part of the curriculum committee there, and we've started a lot of classes. Most recently, we have a sustainable darkroom class for students who are concerned about the various chemicals and things that happen in these classes. We also have and have had for the past 18 years an eco arts class where students are working with plants and materials and things of this nature. We also have a program called Mason Exhibitions, where we bring in a lot of artists who collaborate with students on environmental concerns.
I wanted to see if our friends online wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I think I could, Yamchu. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say, in addition to that, in addition to what's already been said, I think that we also very much encourage people to take personal actions and political actions that are a response to climate change. So personal actions are the things, obviously, that we can do: reduce use of cars, reduce use of planes, eat less meat, reduce your energy use, and things like that. And we can all make a difference that way. But we also encourage people to get involved politically, and that means, that we should all be doing our part on some level. We need to vote, we need to protest when it's appropriate, we need to work for political change. And so we definitely encourage people to amp up what they're doing in that regard. And I think there's a sense that we all have that, we each need to commit to a little bit more all the time to really make this happen.
Yep. And if I may just add one comment to answer this question. I think as artists, we all have a role. I mean, our work might not be sort of directly calling for a specific action, but as artists, I think the biggest thing that we can do is to help people see. And if you bring people in by a really captivating image or an object, the hope, or my hope is, at least in my work, that people come in and stay with the artwork and then have a conversation and talk. So at the opening reception itself, for example, I had people coming up wanting to find out about my process, and then that's when a conversation begins and you can get people to start thinking about issues. Any other questions?
I have a
Yes.
question about canals and how you guys feel about canals. Like, people just make canals in random spots. I don't feel like they think about what it's like. They think about where they connect in the water to, but then they're like draining stuff, and I don't know. I wonder what.
Actually, I guess I could reply briefly to that by saying that we have engaged in projects that had to do with the reduction in the water in rivers and diversion of rivers and dam. A lot of us have focused specifically, as you saw from the theme, on water in particular. And these are all things that we need to think about going forward. So canals, I don't know that anyone has specifically responded to canals, but it's part of the mix of the ways in which people are impacting the waterways that need to be thought about. So thank you for raising it.
Yeah, I need to do more research. Certainly, that's interfering with like what is already natural in the environment. And I don't really think that's always a good thing. So just personally, I would be skeptical. And if people are kind of making plans to create canals, I think it could intervene in a way that's damaging for the environment.
Because we had like 17,000 people from up north move to Palm Beach County. That's where I'm from. But it was like now I'm sure they're gonna have to like build more space. Also, they're building like new cities and stuff. And it's kind of odd, and I don't know how it's like they've already drained enough of the Everglades, and now it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm encouraged to hear that you're skeptical of this. We need to be asking questions about actions such as these. I'm currently working on larger wildfire shelters, and it's inspired by the idea of, does it make sense to have residences that are fixed anymore? Like will we need to actually return to being more of a mobile society because of how we're being impacted by climate change? And, there are some places around the world that are growing less and less habitable because of the extreme weather that we're experiencing as a result. So, yeah.
Yeah, some of the coral species that I photographed were actually collected from outside of the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal as they were being dug. And, those, as a plus, they allow these huge container ships to pass through without having to burn as much fossil fuel by going all the way around continents. But as a minus, well, first of all, we are still burning some fossil fuel to run these container ships, and also they become conduits for invasive species or different things like that. And so it's an incredibly complicated ecological issue.
Sorry, the people on the Zoom can't hear you.
Oh,
if
yeah.
You don't have the mic, so.
I have a microphone now. I did want to say that all your art is like all very beautiful. I think it's very interesting to see such different perspectives on the climate crisis all in one place. I wanted to ask, like, what about your art is impacted from being in a collective like this? Is there an aspect of your art that has changed from now that you're working together versus like when you were working individually, or is it kind of the same but you're all like pals now? Like.
So I thank you. I think thank you for the kind words and also the question. Definitely for myself. So my preoccupation, the medium that I'm most interested in the last 5 or 6 years has been found and used materials. And I don't kind of directly comment on a particular climate change issue, but through my choice of materials, I haven't bought any new materials to make art in the last 5 or 6 years. I've just been collecting stuff and reusing stuff. So indirectly, I am kind of making a statement about the kind of impact that we have on the environment as an artist. But I have never quite thought about climate change art until I met these amazing peers. And I thought, my goodness, there could be climate change art in all these different permutations and different ways of presenting and talking about issues. So for me, it definitely has changed, but I kind of still staying in my lane and kind of making sculptures and paintings mostly. But I want to hear what anyone else has to say.
I'll just say quickly that it's hard to do everything yourself, right? So getting together like-minded people is huge, and especially for these really big complex issues. And, each of us are kind of focusing on different things, but all that energy is helpful to have as a group.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. And I wanted to add, as the curator of the group, it's been an honor for me also to see the works of all of these artists, and it has affected my practice as well. Previous to meeting the collective, I had done exhibitions that dealt with the environmental issues, specifically like in Colombia and Latin America, but like having all of the artists and their work have nurtured that in my practice and have allowed me to focus on different subjects and also see different realities across the world. So I think that it's been a positive active, or I'm sure not only for the artists, but also for myself as a curator.
Thank you, everybody, for a great presentation and great questions. And anyone who wants to meet come at 5 o'clock for a further discussion. It sounds like it's going to be really good conversation. So thank you, everybody.